Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you surely know that this is my series in which I use tarot and oracle cards to help us explore topics related to living the intentional life. And before we jump into this week's spread, you saw the title of this week's video, right? It was in the thumbnail and it's also in the description box below. I titled it, It Comes to Sacred Practice and Intuition. Now, I think we're probably on the same page when it comes to intuition, but let me check. When I think of intuition, I think of it in the terms that Carl Jung described. Yeah? He describes 4 ways of receiving and processing information. One of them is thinking, the rational, analytical mind. One of them is feeling. Now, it's not an emotional thing so much as giving value to things, what is necessary, what is unnecessary, what is good, what is undesirable. Yeah. Then there's the sensing, which is the information that we receive and process through our senses: sight, sound, touch, smell. And then there's intuition, which is something that we all have, but some of us have easier access to than others. It's a human basic thinking process. And it's a holistic process. Whereas thinking, rational thought, is often breaking things apart and analyzing them. Intuition is seeing wholes and knowing patterns from holistic ways of understanding. So, for example, with tarot cards, intuition might give us information by looking at one card or a series of cards, and without breaking apart detail and symbols, we see a pattern and suddenly knowledge appears, information appears. Or we look at a map, and instead of trying to figure out, well, okay, then I go this way and I make a left, and then I need to go farther this way, and I'm going over here, so I don't want to go right, I want to keep going straight. Instead of doing that, we look at the map, we see where we start, we see where we're going, and boom, the road appears before our eyes. Yeah? Without a GPS system. We just see the path as the clear, obvious thing, because our intuitive minds see the whole picture and pick out the most important information. Does that make sense? Those are different aspects of the intuitive mind, according to Carl Jung. And I think the most accessible way for us to understand it as people interested in body, mind, spirit, in living intentional lives. Then there's the other piece of the title, which is sacred practice. What is sacred practice? It could be many things, right? It could be meditation. It could be prayer. If you're Roman Catholic, for example, it could be saying a rosary. It could be doing a novena. It could be, what is it called? Eucharistic adoration, where you sit, it's a kind of meditation. You sit in front of the Eucharist in a church and you allow the divine to relate with you. Yeah, we listen for and feel for the love of the divine. That's a Roman Catholic practice, similar to meditation, actually. Or there could be rituals. Yeah, there are rituals that are associated with religions, but there are also personal sacred rituals that many of us have. Some of them are associated with Wicca, some of them are not. Some of them are self-created. And all of those sacred practices are wonderful, I think. They're beautiful. They can be healing, right? They can be revelatory. We can feel ourselves cracking open, as they say, or recognizing the enlightenment that is already here. The union with the divine that is already present can be realized during sacred practice, right? Sacred practice can also be a way for us to feel uplifted in body, mind, and spirit as well. It can help us to open to the powerful flow of intention. However, many of us, I'm not saying all of us, but many of us, probably the great portion of us, at the end of the ritual we say, that was nice, and then we go back into our day and we do the same Stupid stuff we always do. We pick the same fights with our partners. We scream at the same people in traffic. We are irritated by the same things we see in social media. We get annoyed at the fireworks that we see during a kind of public display of exuberance and boisterousness. Or we get irritated at the people who are complaining about the noise during those times. You know, we go back into our days and we do the same things we do, which is too bad, because the benefits, the effects of those sacred practices are merely fractional if they're only really limited to the times when we're in practice. The hope, I believe, is for us to carry those practices out into our daily lives, to live our practices. Do we know that? I hope we know that, because that's part of living an intentional life. Yeah, we use those practices, we engage in those practices. I think that's better than use. We engage in those practices in order to open ourselves to both our connection with the fullness of ourselves, the eternal natures that we are here having these co-creative human experiences, and to the fullness of the divine, so that we are also open to the powerful flow of intention. And am I saying that I do that on a regular basis? No. But it is the direction that I'm moving in, especially these days, more consciously. I'm more consciously moving in the direction of bringing my practice into my daily life. And I think, interestingly, this spread is pointing in that direction as well. So, friends, what are we going to do? We're going to crack open the spread as we hope to crack open ourselves in the midst of our sacred practice and in the midst of our engagement with our intuition as we live our intentional lives. So, I'll show you the spread. We'll talk about the spread very briefly, and then we'll break it into its parts. So, friends, here's the spread. I think this is a beautiful spread that I've been using, started in the last lunar cycle and carrying through this lunar cycle. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you think it's amazing, stunning, and wonderful? I hope so, because I do too. And if you have not seen this spread before, this spread is based on the Ace of Wands card from the Tarot of the Holy Light. And if you want to see a description of the spread, if you want to see a walkthrough of the spread using only one deck, I'll put a card up here for you to hop on over and take a look at that. It might help you engage with the spread a little bit more easily if you see that. But it is a lovely spread, and you see that it's broken down into 4 sections, right? There were the 4 cards at the very top, and that indicates the light of the divine beaming into our daily lives, into the question we're asking of the tarot, into our natal charts. However you want to engage with this spread. This is the light of the divine, the wisdom, the knowledge, the love of the divine beaming into whatever we're presenting for this spread. And the question I ask every week for this spread is, how can we live our lives more intentionally? And this is the divine response to that question, the initial response. And then there were the 3 cards which seem to be in a vertical line coming from the bottom to the top. And those are the wand growing in the divine light. It's the sprout of what is in the process of manifesting. Now, like a sprout or a shoot, breaking ground and growing in the divine light. And then there were 3 cards coming in from the left-hand side, right? The left-hand side, right? And those 3 cards are a representation of how we can reach out and grasp that growing sprout. So there's the light beaming down, there's the sprout growing up, and there's our way of grasping what is growing in the light of the divine. And then there were those two round circles at the bottom, right? Those are from an oracle deck. And they give us some advice. In the Ace of Wands card from the Tarot of the Holy Light, there's a burst of fire down there at the bottom. And instead of fire, I decided to use those as advice cards. That's just me. And so now if you're curious about the decks and you're curious about the names of the creators, as always, there will be a short clip at the end of this video that gives you all of that information, as well as links in the description box below that you can use to go and check out the decks and maybe purchase one or all of them. They're all currently, at the time of this video, still in print. So I recommend purchasing at least one, if not all of them. The first one I would most highly recommend is the one that was my gateway drug into the world of continental tarot system, which was the Tarot of the Holy Light. And there's a link to in the description box below. Just saying. So that was the spread. We're going to read starting from the group of 4 cards at the very top, the Divine Light. Here they are. You just saw the 4 cards. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, which is where I began laying the cards, frankly, moving clockwise, we had the 7 of Swords, upright. We had the 9 of Discs, upright. Then in the lower right-hand corner, we had the Magus, otherwise known as the Magician, upright. And then in the bottom left-hand corner below the 7 of Swords, we had the 9 of Wands, upright. Now, why do I keep saying upright? Well, when I use this deck, when I shuffle this deck, I work with it with reversals. So every time I riffle shuffle this deck, from the first time I used it out of the box till now, and I will continue this way till the cards break apart into tiny dust particles, I will cut it, turn half of it around, upside down, and riffle shuffle. And then cut it, turn half of it around, and riffle shuffle. So I'm riffle shuffling in reversals, reversals of reversals, reversals of reversals of reversals, etc. So this time, having all 4 cards upright was remarkable. Now, we'll get to one of the cards and we'll see that in its upright position, it's still not the most joyful card in the deck, but still, all 4 of them were upright. And I would generally read the cards in clockwise fashion from the upper left-hand corner, unless there is an indication that it should be read differently. And this time, I'm getting a strong inclination to read these cards differently. And it's not only because there is one major arcana card in the spread, although that I think is also significant. It's not only because the other 3 cards are minor arcana and they're all of different suits, right? There's one earth suit, there's one air suit, there's one fire suit. There are no cups. There's no water in this part of the spread, prominently visible. But I'm feeling this Magus is the central figure of this grouping of 4 cards. I really am feeling that very strongly. And so that's the direction I've decided to read this spread. I'm going to read the Magus, and then I'm like vector arrows. We're going to see the directions that the Magus moves in and the influences that are upon the Magus. So you can think of them as the lines with arrows that you see on a graph, yeah, where there's a line with arrows on both sides. So information is going in both directions. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's how we're going to read. We're going to start with the Magus. So let me pull the Magus out. And this is our lovely Magus. Here he is in all of his glory. And you can see that this Magus is attributed to the element of air. So here, the Magus is attributed to air. So the vital attributes of the element of air enter into our world, enter into our natal charts. A lot of air is coming in. And so it being kitty corner, catty corner, however you want to say that, to the Seven of Swords, that is also, I think, indicative of something. Now we've got air and then an air card in the upper left-hand corner. So there's a very strong relationship between these two cards, informed by the other cards around them. So, again, the Magus. Now, being card number 1, the Magus is associated with Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is an ox. And interestingly, the first letter of the Elder Futhark is Fehu in the runes, and Fehu is also associated with an ox, a domesticated ox. So, they're both associated with wealth. In ancient agricultural cultures, an ox is a representation of wealth because that is your living tool to help create the wealth and stability of your home, right? The ox helps you plow the fields. So an ox is a sign of wealth, but not wealth like coins in a chest, but wealth that is asking for us to maintain it, to give it attention, to continue it, to help it grow. Does that make sense? It's that kind of thing. And that's what is associated here with the Magus. It's the wealth of creation, of giving attention to creation as well. The creation of wealth, the creation of home, of legacy, of stability. And you can see this beautiful card. We've got the Magus holding 2 Cardusiuses, right? In both hands with this beautiful these beautiful wings in the back. We've got a crown on their head. We've got the sun right there in the sacral chakra, giving energy to that creative power. We've got the divine triangle at the top, the divine trinity. We've also got wings down here at the bottom, right? Yeah, and above the wings at the bottom, indicating air, I suppose, we've got a path of fire, which is also interesting. Yeah, because right next to the Magus is a fire card. Yeah, so right next to the Magus, at the bottom, reminding us of this fiery bottom, was the Wands card, and then above, the element of air, right here in the Swords card. So a lot of interesting things. And that's why I think I'm drawn to this Magus card so strongly. Particularly in this reading. Not that I'm not generally in love with the Magus. The Magus is one of my favorite cards of the deck. I'm sure it is for most of us. So what does this mean? Well, the Magus in this deck is, because it's air, it's imagination. Right? It's the imagination of our genius and uniqueness. What is genius? I'm thinking of genius not so much in the modern sense of being really, really clever, really, really smart, but in the more antique sense, in the more ancient sense of genius, where we also get jinn and genie, genius, which is that the unique spirit that informs our lives, our genius. Yeah? So, the imagination of our genius, which speaks our uniqueness into the world. This is the Magus of the seeker of hidden truths. Now, there's a lot of information and knowledge that is a part of this card here, which is different from the Magician in Pamela Coleman Smith's deck, for example, which has all 4 elements there on the table. This Magus has those elements available, but is really focused on the mind, I believe. Awakening to higher potential, our mission. Yeah? Initiation into a new creative level, too. We're starting a new creative path. A fiery path, yes, a creative path, but one of that is informed by our imagination. We realize our innate potentials here as well, as we walk our evolutionary path, waiting to realize our eternal nature, because that's the direction we're moving in, right? The Magus has moved from the fool. I'm here, I'm a newborn in this world, and I'm going to go and discover who I really am as I create this magnificent life that I'm beginning to create. Now, the Magus's keen mind pierces through the veil of physical reality to the divine dancing within that reality, not through to some other separated thing, but through into the interior of all that exists, which is the divine. This Magus is active in focusing his, her, their life force in the direction of the journey, in the direction of the intentional life. So, perhaps we can see the intentional life on this card as, instead of a river of water, as a fiery path that moves us forward. Creating our wealth, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be coin. It could be a wealth of information. It could be a wealth of emotion, of interpersonal communication, of interpersonal connections. It could be a wealth of, what's the one I left, of artistic creation. Wealth is not only about gold standard, right? Just like the cow is not made of, hopefully not made of gold. Yeah, I mean, there were gold cows in the past. People worshipped them, but that's not what this Magus card is pointing to. And yet, this Magus card is also reminding us that all of that begins with our imagination and our genius speaking our uniqueness into the world. And how can we do that? Well, let's look at the cards that are swimming around the Magus card. And let's start with the one in the upper left-hand corner. Let's start with this Seven of Swords card. Here we go. Beautiful card. You'll notice that we've got a fox there, down there at the bottom. You see that fox? Do you see what's in that fox's mouth? We got a chicken in the mouth. Do you see what's on the fox's back? We got a rooster on the back, pecking at the fox, stealing away a chicken. Doesn't look like a very positive card, does it? And above the fox and the chickens, we've got the divine eye in a wheel, giving us like a wheel of fortune image. Now there are 3 swords above, there are 3 swords below, and there's that one sword breaking the deadlock. And you see at the bottom that the Seven of Swords is pointing towards the Libra decanate of Gemini and its subruler Venus, from which the cardinal aspect of mutable air's vital attributes enter our world. Now, the cardinal aspect of mutable air. No fixedness here. It's a lot of motion, right? It's the cardinal aspect, let's get going, and the mutable aspect of, okay, we've done a lot of stuff, let's clean up and then move on to the next thing. We've also got a complement here because this is the second decanate of Gemini. The complement is Mercury in Pisces. And you might think, Mercury in Pisces, is that really all that comfortable? Mercury darting about, quick, 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 message, message, message. Let's play some games. In Pisces, deep spiritual connection. Yeah? There is a positive aspect of that as well. So, the one thing that was connected to the Magus here is this card. Yeah, we got Venus and Mercury together in communication with the air of the Magus. And this card is telling us that we are able to catalog possible options before deciding on a course of action. We want to think about what we're going to do. Makes sense, right? And just like the fox grabbing the chicken. Now remember, the fox is not grabbing the chicken just like, is not doing a money grab. The fox is not being evil here. The fox is grabbing the chicken to have a meal for itself and its family, right? The fox is feeding its family. Now, it's not a happy thing for the chicken, but that's what foxes are created to do. The fox is doing its foxness correctly. So, and it's not an easy thing. So a crafty mind can find advantages to create success is another thing to think about here. A clever mind. Exploring angles that others might not notice is also indicative of this card. So the Magus might want to do that, might want to engage our minds, to think of things, to plan our way forward without attachment to the path. Yeah? Attachment closes us up and sinks us in our current of intention. We want to keep open to possibilities, but imagine our course of the direction of the course of our intention. Does that make sense? And see things that other people might not have noticed as well. Our ability to create calls for attention to detail. Our ability to create calls for attention to details, organization, and pattern recognition, which is a very intuitive thing. So it's not all analysis and pros and cons, and well, if I do this, and well, if I do that, and then there's also pattern recognition, which this fox is very able to engage in. That's where that intuitive thought process can enter into this picture here through the Magus and the Seven of Swords. Now, pattern recognition. Where do we see the path forward? How do we see the path forward? And then Mercury in Pisces, preparing for possible circumstances and, again, imaginative and intuitive understanding of where to go and what to do. Our imagination and intuition are engaged by Mercury being in Pisces. So that's what the Magus can take advantage of. Take advantage of intuition. See the patterns. See where, not analyze the pattern. Well, you can analyze the patterns if you want, but we can also see the patterns and notice what is there that perhaps other people might not have noticed yet. And that's one way that the Magus, an air card in this deck, can create. Does that make sense? And that's an opening to the power of intention kind of way of engaging with the Seven of Swords. And so the next card we're going to look at is the one right next to it, above the Magus's head, above the crown. We had the Nine of Discs, and look at this, is just a wonderful thing. Look at this beautiful card, the Nine of Discs. We've got a very, very happy lion, contented lion down there at the bottom. We've got an eagle above. The natural mates in alchemy, right? The lion of fire, the eagle of water. They mate. The red king and the white queen, they mate to do the great work. And here they are very comfortable together. The eagle is looking up at the mating of the sun and the moon and ready to soar. It's just a gorgeous card. And at the bottom you see that we have Virgo and we have Mercury, right? Because this is the Virgo decadent of Virgo and its subruler Mercury, from which the mutable aspect of mutable Earth's vital attributes enter our world. So we got Mercury again. Mercury was just in Pisces, and now Mercury is in its mature home of Virgo. So instead of darting around like Mercury might do in Gemini, Mercury here in Virgo is more, it's quick, is focused, attentive. Mercury has found a home in the earth. So, we just had Gemini to the left, which again is one of the homes of Mercury. Here we've got Mercury in its more mature state. And what does this mean? Well, Nine of Discs in most decks, in many decks, give us the idea of joy and freedom available to one who has solved the challenges of survival. Yeah? The one who lives well. In Pamela Coleman Smith's deck, we've got the beautiful woman in the beautiful, elegant gown, in her garden holding her falcon with grapes and is just enjoying the wealth, the privilege, the stuff that she has. So that is here too. Yeah, the lion and the eagle are here enjoying the freedom available to them. They've solved their challenges. They're living well. There's free time here and energy and resources for our unique interests. So this card, if we take advantage of it, we've done the mapping out. We're intuitively noticing patterns and the way to move forward. And here we discover we also have the free time to create. And yet this card asks for maturity to be able to maintain the state of joy and energy and the recognition of the resources we have and the time that we have to do the things we want to do. A well-ordered, healthy household with intellectual development is the key for this card. So that woman in the garden, for example, with her falcon, she also has the time to study, and she will also take advantage of that. Just as Mercury here in Virgo will take the time to improve her there. Remember, Mercury is a kind of androgyne. Has male aspects, has female aspects, and combined into one non-binary. If there's a non-binary god, Mercury, I think, is the exemplar. So, well-ordered home, healthy household, intellectual development. And we're not locked up in our gardens either. We bring our value out to the community, including those who are in less secure positions, and we are joyful to help them, to assist them in whatever way they are joyful to accept. We don't want to force other people to change or to receive things that they might not want to receive. There are some people who do that. You're going to take this kind of thing because I think you need it, whether that person wants it or not. Have you ever seen people behaving in that way? That's not this card. This card is going out into the community and sharing the wealth to those who are happy to receive it. So those two cards are informing our magus at the top, right? Finding our path. Noticing we have time to study, to enjoy life. And if we're studying and enjoying life, we're also much more open to the power of intention, to flowing with our current of intention. And so, right next door to that Magus card, in the fire section, we had the Nine of Wands. Another first decadent card. Now we had we had the Virgo decadent of Virgo up at the top right, and here, catty corner, we have the Sagittarius decadent of Sagittarius. So another first decadent, catty corner, in the Nine of Wands. And so we also have the sub-ruler of Jupiter, which points to the mutable aspect of mutable fires, vital attributes entering our world, entering our natal charts. So we had mutable earth at the top right, in the bottom left we have mutable fire. And oftentimes we think of earth dampening fire, but I don't think that's happening here. I think they're very well balanced. So in the upper right with the mutable earth, we've got our security, our joy, our freedom. Here in the Nine of Wands, we've got a little bit too much fire. And Jupiter's influence here brings larger than life situations. Sometimes when we create and we're open to creation, sometimes things happen a little more than we thought they might, and it might be a little overwhelming. We may want to take shelter from some of our creations from time to time. even if that shelter is with our natural enemy. If you look at this card, we've got that volcano in the background, which is really clear to see. In front of the volcano, there are 9 wands stuck in the ground. And then over to the left, I think you will see it as the left, it's right over here. Now there's a cave. Do you see the cave? In the cave, there are a goat and a wolf, not natural friends, right? So we may need to take shelter even if it's with our natural enemy. We might even feel jinxed. Our creations may overwhelm us to the point that we feel like we're being there are so many words are coming to mind, and none of them do I want to say on camera. We're being subdued and dominated by the divine, or by our own creations. So, surviving this upheaval will bring a shift in consciousness. It's not a bad thing, it's just an overwhelming thing at the moment. It may need a time out to recover from the stress of our creation, to restore our vital force. We might, just last week we were talking about burnout. So the magus here, because of possible residual resistance, may, if things go really, really well, start feeling overwhelmed by what they have created. And in those instances, we have the advice to take a break, get some shelter, and know that we are growing in this experience. So if we have found a spot of safety, it would be wise to take advantage of it. If our genius has turned into a volcano. Does that make sense? That's what the divine is speaking to us right now. Is speaking us into our creative lives by, one, engaging our intuition and satisfaction and the power of intention, and remembering that even if things get geared up to the point that it becomes overwhelming, we can take shelter. It's okay to take shelter. Especially in this card. Right? We can duck and hide. Take a breath. Shake it off. Get our energy back together. Find out where that stupid resistance was and maybe do a little bit of healing on that resistance, and then take another big breath and move back out. Into the sun. Into our power as the creator of our lives. Now? So that's, that is the sun beaming in. That's the divine wisdom beaming into our lives in this coming week. Excellent message. Now we're going to look at what is growing in that divine light. So here are those 3 cards right now. The 3 cards you saw growing in the light of the divine from the bottom up. That's the direction we're going to read these. Were the 9 of discs. Notice something? Yeah, the 9 of discs, the Knight of Swords, and then the Popes. Very interesting resonance, I think, to the divine light beaming into the spread from the top. Growing in that, we've got especially 2 cards that are resonant. I don't want to say the same. They are resonant with what we saw at the top. We'll start off with the 9 of discs in this deck. Beautiful card. We've got the 4 discs in the ground of stability. We've got the 5 discs above of will, of magical workings, of our hands making stuff happen. The pentagram, right? And you don't see, the coins show different patterns, and it's difficult to see what those patterns are in this card in this deck. But the 9 of discs, what is this pointing to? Well, Fruitful investments is one indication from Picard, Eudes Picard. Acquisition of property is also possible. Yeah, getting stuff. Remember the Magus card is associated with Aleph and Fehu, the rune Fehu, the Hebrew letter Aleph for ox. Yeah, acquisition of property. Fruitful investments, very harmonic with that card. But also abundance, sustainable systems, and domestic creativity and productivity. Echoes of the Nine of Discs, not the exact same meanings, but echoes of the Nine of Discs from the Nine of Discs card at the top, right? With the eagle and the lion, and the recognition of the similarities between that card and Pamela Coleman Smith's understanding of the Nine of Pentacles. Domestic creativity, productivity, abundance. So that's what is beginning to grow in the light of the divine. So we come in as the Magus with all of this potential, and in that light, in the light of that, we are productivity or abundance in a sustainable way. Not abundance of like a flash in the pan of, whoa, look at all that. We're here on vacation and at the Copacabana, and there's a sudden burst of abundance, and then we go back to our daily lives. No, this is a sustainable system of creation of wealth and abundance. Starts to grow here. Now, things that are starting to grow ask for attention and nurturing, right? So what is the next thing that informs the growth of this wand? The next thing that informs the growth of the wand is this very nice Knight of Swords card. Do you see that? Now you see this Knight of Swords is riding his, her, or their horse. Remember, we're all kings, we're all queens, we're all knights, we're all pages, whether we are in male bodies, in female bodies, in transgendered bodies, in cisgendered bodies, in intersex bodies, whatever. We're all of the courts. We have aspects of all of the court in us. So we are all Knights of Swords. Riding through the water. Yeah, pretty deep water actually. I mean, not the deepest water, but yeah, that horse has got to really keep its attention on where it's going and where it's placing its feet in the middle of that water, because one false step is going to, the legs of that horse are going to be swept out from underneath them. And above the knight we see the crab, right? Or a scorpion. And a helmet above that. Why do we see a scorpion? Why do we see a river here in a Knight of Swords? Well, because in the Eudes Picard deck, the swords are water. I know, freaky, right? The swords are water and the cups are air. Cups are air? What's up with that? Well, if you have not seen any of the other videos I've done using this deck, Christine Payne-Towler gave me a really good insight into this. For Eudes Picard, the cups, the chalices, are not the metallic goblets that we often see in either a Tarot de Marseille or a Waite-Smith card. He sees the goblets as crystalline. Perhaps a little bit more like Aleister Crowley saw the Holy Grail as being a crystalline structure. Now, Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris maintained the cups and water association, but Eudes Picard sees that crystalline structure as an etheric, a mental, an air symbol, because light penetrates crystal, right? Just as swords can penetrate water. So, the Knight of Swords is a water card. And yet the Knight of Swords is still a knight. This knight is intrepid and adventurous, willing to throw themselves into the fray, willing to ride out into an adventure. Yeah, this is an adventurer, a rebel perhaps, or an athlete, or a speaker. Someone who is willing to go out and engage with the world. But because we see this knight and the horse in the midst of this water that looks like it has we don't know what's really going on inside of that water. We don't know what the currents are. And so this card is reminding us to know the tides before moving forward, because there could be unknown influences working below the surface of what looks like a fairly placidly moving body of water. There could be a riptide underneath there. So this night, yes, we're ready for an adventure, we're ready to ride out, but we also want to give attention to the currents. Pay attention to where we're going. Not ride out blindly like another knight might. Does that make sense? So we've got the stability, we've got this abundance growing for us, and we want to ride out into an adventure, and we want to also make sure we see where we're going and where the currents are flowing. Reminding us a little bit of that Seven of Swords card, right? Seeing the pattern recognition. And so we move up into the tip of the sprout growing in the light of the divine, which was the Popes. Look at this beautiful card, reminding me very much of a Tarot de Marseille, Popes. And so this card, the Popes, is associated with the moon. And the moon resides in Cancer, right? So this card also points to the mutable water's vital attributes entering our world. Mutable water. Now we have mutable air above. We have mutable earth above that. Here we've got some mutable water happening. Wait a second, mutable water. Cardinal water? Just a second. Cancer. Just a second, I'm wrong. Okay, so Aries is, Aries. Taurus, Gemini, mutable. Oh, this is cardinal. What am I saying? This is cardinal water. My bad. So yes, this is cardinal water's vital attributes entering our world. So this is also the second card, right? So we've got Hebrew letters associated with that, which is Bet. Bet kind of looks like this. And yet it is the letter for house and home. Good matching to that Nine of Coins card, right? House and home, architecture, but also our universal home. Yeah, creation. And the duality here of male and female, hot and cold, light and dark. They're also indicated in this card as well. Now, the rune here is Anzus. Let's see, I'm sorry. Urus, which looks kind of like a funny N, and it's the rune of also an ox, but a wild ox. Now, Fehu is the domesticated ox. Urus is the wild ox. So here, instead of wealth, we've got strength and energy, speed, courage with understanding and determination. A little bit of a destructive possibility, right? An ox in a china shop. But this is the wild ox that is going to go where they're going to go. And they're brave enough to move forward. Carrying forward that idea of the Knight of Swords, right? But who is the Papes in this deck? Well, the Papes is the image of the sacred word. The divine word, teaching, the law, as in Torah, the law, yeah? And occult knowledge. Knowledge which comes from the darkness. Not the darkness as an evil, but the darkness of the less rational, right? And interestingly, also science is indicated according to Udes Picard in this card. So the popes is receptivity and divine imagination, which comes from the subdominant side of the brain. What does that mean? It depends on who we are. If we are more logically driven people, then the subdominant side would be our more intuitive. If we are more intuitively driven people, the subdominant would be the more logical. Yeah? So it depends on which side we use more frequently. This is the less frequently used side. So it's the subdominant side of the brain. And it pairs beautifully, according to Udes Picard, with the magus. So we've got the magus's pair according to Udes Picard. The magus would be the dominant side of the brain, creating in the world. This is the subdominant side of the brain, receiving divine imagination and creating in the world from the use of occult knowledge, because that side of the brain has a little less light in it, right? So we want to both we want both sides of the brain to cooperate in order to create in the world. So we want both the magus and the popes working in conjunction to live our intentional lives. And that's what's growing here. In the light of the brightness of the magus, the less brightness of the subdominant popes is growing, and they work in conjunction, and the brilliance of creation happens. Because, again, this is the duality, not the separation of duality, but the spectrum of the duality. Because duality is not just two, it's a spectrum of status, of state. Not status, a spectrum of state. Does that make sense? Can you see what's growing here from that 9 of discs card of our comfort and our abundance and creativity and productivity, being aware of, as we take our leap into the adventure of our lives, that we pay attention to the currents that we are moving through, and then we recognize the fullness of our pepes, working in conjunction of the divine light of the magus together to create a beautiful intentional life. This spread is just amazing, I think. I hope you think so too. If you do, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Pause the video and let me know in the comments below before we move on to the next set of 3 cards coming in from the left, which is how we're able to reach out and grasp this beautiful thing that is growing in the light of the divine. Here are those 3 cards. Those 3 cards, from left to right, you saw, were the 3 of Cups. And maybe in this deck you can see how those crystalline cups can be reminiscent of air. Yeah? And then we got the Fool. Very interesting, right? And then we got the 7 of Swords. And that's the direction that we're going to be reading these. We'll start with the 3 of Cups, move into the Fool, and then the 7 of Swords. And remember, cups are air, swords are water in this deck. Okay? Now, so you saw the cups with a butterfly. And there are some decks that have the Fool following a butterfly. Have you ever seen any of those? Which just reminded me of that when I saw this butterfly in the 3 of Cups card. But that butterfly is here to remind us that this is an air card, an air soup. And the 3 of Cups, we've got the 3 cups. We've got what looks like a hard-boiled egg split in half vertically. And then we got these beautiful flowers growing on the side of the top cup. Now in Udes Picard's original deck, there are other things in the card. There are zodiacal symbols in the cups, but here we don't have those. But still, we've got 3 air elements here in one card. So the 3 of Cups is the beginning of an evolution. Yeah? It's ascension and evolution of the soul, like the butterfly transformed, I should say. Well, maybe transforming. It's the germination. That egg there, that egg has been germinated and is now in the process of evolving and ascending. So, how do we begin the journey of reaching out and grasping that beautiful wand that's growing in the light of the beautiful divine? Well, we begin with our own personal evolution. That's that seed, the soul, which has been impregnated and germinated, is evolving and ascending like the butterfly flying. And that's how we begin to reach out to grasp the potential that is growing in the light of the divine this week. We allow for and nurture our own, what is the adjective form of soul? Solar? Our own divine evolution. Our own spiritual evolution. Solar, no. Spirit, spiritual, soul. There's a word and it's not coming to me. I'm sure there is a word. But you know what I mean. And then we move right into the Fool. Now, where do we place the Fool? This is an interesting question. In this deck, you'll see this wonderful Fool. Instead of a dog, it kind of looks like a cat to me, scratching at the Fool's leg down at the bottom. Do you see that? The Fool holds 2 sticks. One stick holds his, her, or their belongings. The other is their, sometimes looks like a walking stick, sometimes looks like a Fool's performance puppet stick. Yeah, this looks like an ear of corn to me. And at the very top, right next to the Fool's pointy hat, we see the Hebrew letter Shin. Which, to me, part of my very simple little heart thinks, oh, I wish they hadn't done that. Because for me, the Fool properly belongs at the end of the series with Tau, which is the Hebrew letter, which joins Shin and Aleph. It's the transition letter that transitions the end back to the beginning, which for me is what the Fool is. Now for this deck, they chose to put the Fool before the world, as far as Hebrew associations. So it would go Shin, then Tau, which is the world, and then the Magus with Aleph. But still, we don't have a number on this card, right? This is El Loco. That's not a 1, that's an L. E-L, Loco. So I'm gonna put this silly little Fool where I think he belongs. Right before the Magus, at the end of the world, before the Magus. So we got the Fool, we got the Magus, we got the High Priestess. A wonderful triad. Yeah, a wonderful progression as well. The Fool in and leave and ready to move out of the liminal space after the world, to move into the Magus, which is the beginning of manifestation and creation, into the High Priestess, which is the opening to divine connection, reopening to a recognition of our divine connection. Does that make sense? Okay, so, but that's how I see the Fool. And yet we do have the Shin letter here, so we got to read the Shin. What is Shin? Shin is a tooth or teeth, which think of a pit bull. I think it's a pit bull. The dog that grabs onto things and won't let go with their teeth. Yeah. So steadfastness in faith is part of the association for Shin. Also the changeless one. That pit bull's not going to let go, right? It's unchangeable. Or change for the better. There are two possibilities here. You also see there. Do you see the number 300 here at the bottom? At the very, I think it's here for you. Yeah, it's right here. Do you see that number 300 above the title in the larger hill? 300 is actually the number of the letter Shin. All of the Hebrew letters are associated with numbers. Yeah? So the number associated with Shin is 300, which is divine power. Kind of cool. So we begin with our Three of Cups of our personal evolution, and we move into perhaps a reception of divine power by our steadfastness in our faith, by our careful actions, which is interesting, associated with the Fool. It's also, the Fool is associated with Laguz, which is lake or water, energy, renewal, regeneration. It's also our dreams or fantasies, good or bad. I mean, fantasies can be a good thing, like, oh, this is a fantasy, a dream come true. Yeah, those fantasies of things, or fantasies that are just distractions and lead to attachment and suffering. Now, there are different kinds of fantasies, right? The more positive and the less positive. Both, I think, are associated with Laguz. Also, the unknown or hidden, and achieving our goals. All of that is associated with Laguz, and wonderful things to bring forward from the evolution and ascension and germination that began here. So what is the actual meaning of the Fool for the creator of this deck? Well, actually, this creator does not look kindly on the Fool. Yeah? The most beneficent way of seeing the Fool through the eyes of Uds Picard is being led by our passions and difficult to rule. Now, for those trying to rule us, that's not such a good thing. But for us, that could be beneficial, right? Yeah? Led by our passions, kind of like that fox with the hens in the Seven of Swords. Satisfying the passions of our flesh, kind of like the Nine of Discs that we saw in the Divine Light, and the Nine of Discs growing at the very base of the wand, which is growing in the light of the divine. Also being moved by instinct, which is associated with intuition. Yes, not the same, but associated with intuition. So with our growth and our development, we're able to, I think, accomplish more of the positive aspects of the Fool and be led by our passions, not allowing ourselves to be ruled by those around us, following our own path, satisfying our passions to satisfy ourselves on our path, and moving with our instinct. We're taking stock of what is going on around us. We're not ignoring what's going on around us, but we see the path through it. Which leads us to the Seven of Swords. Another Seven of Swords, right? But in this deck, this is the Seven of Water, not the Seven of Air. But still, we got an echo of that Seven of Swords, which is kind of cool. But again, this is the Seven of Air. And here we see the stability of the four under the earth. But under the earth, we've got the sun. Not the best place for the sun. Maybe this is nighttime. But have you ever seen, well, I'm going to start with the moon card in the Thoth Crowley deck. The Crowley Thoth deck, drawn by Frida Harris, Lady Frida Harris. Have you seen that? There's the beetle, which looks like it's under the earth, pushing the sun up. Because in ancient mythologies, often the belief was that the sun went down under the earth, into the earth, and had to be reborn again at the beginning of the next day. So the thing that pushed the earth through that underworld, through the earth, was the beetle. So maybe this is the earth going through the underworld. Above, we've got the moon. Light, but not that much light. And that light moves in cycles, right? Sometimes it's brighter, sometimes it's gone. Apparently gone. We see that it's there, but there's not any light directly reflecting off of it. And then we got the triangle, the divine triangle of thought above, in the darkness. So this is darkness over light. According to Picard, this is temporary success. Maybe clandestine undertakings, doing things in the secret of the dark, which could be beneficial. Not showing our hand to everybody who walks by. Yeah, doing things in the dark, not in nefarious or evil intent, but just so that not everybody can see what we're doing. Right? We don't want to be dancing our current of intention out in the public arena right now. And yet we do have diverse sources of information here. We said we want to receive that guidance before we take action. And in so doing, we can, as they say, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And maybe we got a little bit of that sense of maybe worry about defeat in that Nine of Wands card when we were feeling overwhelmed. This card can here be indicating that we can still wrest our victory from that sense of impending defeat by being clever. Again, indicated by that Seven of Swords card in the first part of the spread. Here, also, guess what helps us? Our intuition helps us when information is sparse. So we look for information, and when information is sparse, as we do our occult undertakings, now our clandestine undertakings, as in occult in the dark, not occult like, ooh, mystic, there could be that too, but that's not what I'm talking about. Yeah, are in the shadows, working in the shadows, not because we're evil or doing bad things, but because there's no need for other people to be seeing what we're doing right now. There are times like that, right? And so when we can't get that information, we engage our intuition. And the way to be able to do all of that is by being the magus, being the papes, being the fool. Which all point, I believe, to sacred practices, especially the papes. Yeah? Opening ourselves to the divine is a sacred practice and asks, I believe, calls for sacred practice to prepare ourselves for and to open us to receiving that divine information so that we can move forward as the fool. Not like the idiot, but the fool, led by our passions, satisfying our passions, moving by our instinct, guided by the light of the divine, which comes to us in the darkness. In the darkness. In the darkness. But again, that doesn't happen if we don't move our practice out into our daily lives. If we have this, I've got my practice and there's the practice, and then I walk out and the practice is done and now I'm going to go and bitch and moan and complain to everybody around me. That's not living the practice, right? It doesn't mean walking out and being the victim. Oh, I want to do this, but I can't because, or I won't because, or it's impossible because, or it's hard because. And it may be difficult and hard by common understanding, and yet we know because we are eternal beings having these inspired, divine, co-creative experiences that we are not victims. Can you get on board with that? That you we are not victims. So we've got some advice coming up for us. Are you ready? Here are the 2 cards of advice right now. Isn't that interesting? We got, just after speaking about the moon, right? The moon over the earth. Yeah. Clandestine undertakings, working in the dark. Here we got, for 2 pieces of advice, 2 moon cards. And both of them were waxing gibbuses. Do you know what waxing means? Sometimes, I'm sure you do. Sometimes I have to remind myself. Often I have to remind myself that waxing is when the moon looks like it's getting bigger, and then waning is when it looks like it's starting to get smaller. So moving to the full moon, it's waxing, and moving to the new moon, the dark moon, it's waning, right? So these are both waxing moon cards. They're both waxing gibbuses, so they're just on the verge of coming into the full moon, which is the full power. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And so is this the first? Yes, this is the first one. This is the waxing gibbous, number 17. At the bottom, you see connect. What do you think that's going to tell us? You got it. Merging with kindred souls. Gathering them around us. Like a 3 of Cups card in a Pamela Coleman Smith created deck. They have the 3 women with their cups gathering together, kindred souls, gathering them around. That's the first piece of advice. Gather our tribe together. Enjoy friendship, love, passion, and creativity together. Feel the exchange of energy when sharing laughter, when sharing affection, when making love. It's also the sharing of libido, the sharing of eros, the sharing of that creative power, either sexually or platonically or in some kind of loving manner. It's also calling us to reconnect with those who are on our mind right now. So if we suddenly think of somebody like, oh, I haven't thought about that person in a while. I wonder, this card is saying connect at this time. And for those who are not part of that tribe of kindred souls that we want to gather around, those who we sometimes want to push away, this is also a reminder to allow forgiveness to open our hearts. Yeah, doesn't mean that we have to go out and make contact with everybody who we have felt has wounded us and we are called to forgive. This is allowing the heart to open by allowing forgiveness to blossom within. Not forcing you to make it happen, although that is a beneficial practice. Here we're asking us ourselves to allow it to blossom here, irrespective of who needs to be forgiven. Does that make sense, right? Doesn't mean that we have to, again, we're not going out, we're not taking an inventory and connecting the people who have hurt us and saying, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. This is all the internal work that is indicated here. Allow the heart to open. Good beginning, good advice for any day, but particularly for this spread, I believe. And the next card we got here was also a waxing gibbous. This is number 15. Strength. Yeah? So growing stronger in our actions. Keeping our eyes on the prize is here. Because, again, rather than analyzing our step-by-step course to getting where we want to go, this card is reminding us that we will know the course to get where we want to go as long as we keep our eyes on the milestone, not the destination. There are no destinations. On the milestone, the next milestone. strength of will and character may be tested now. Yeah, and so maybe that's a reminder of the potential of that Nine of Wands card. And so if that test of our will, of our mettle, is too much, is overwhelming to us, we might want to duck into shelter and regather our strength before we move back out into the Knight of Swords card and check where the waters are flowing, making sure we're not stepping into a riptide, and move forward again. Again, continuing our evolution, our growth, and testing our mettle. Discipline of mind, body, and spirit are called for here. That discipline of mind, body, and spirit all together reminds me of our sacred practices. Our sacred practices are ways for us to discipline our minds, our bodies, and our spirits as one cohesive unity. Also, exercise for physical strength is beneficial here. A strong body is a better, more capable vessel of containing and moving our stronger, evolving soul, spirit, eternal natures through this time-space environment. So we want to have and this card is really pointing out that we want to have a consistent spiritual practice as well. We want to exercise our bodies, we want to exercise our minds, and we want to exercise our connection to spirit by doing the reps of our spiritual practice, whatever they may be. But again, we don't want to leave the exercise in the gym. We don't want to leave our spiritual practice on our meditation mat either, or in our church, or in whatever sacred space we have. And we want to bring that out into the world. Does that make sense? Do you see where I got the title for this video now? Sometimes it comes down to intuition and spiritual practice and intuition. And our intuition is more available, informed by our sacred practice, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? I hope it does. It makes sense to me. If it does make sense to you, let me know in the comments below. If it does not make sense to you, let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear from you. What do you think? And so friends, here we are. If you're still here, please hit that thumbs up button. It helps the channel, it helps the algorithm and getting people to see this channel. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and hit the alarm bell so you get notifications of when I upload videos. And also, comment below. Again, I would love to hear from you. If you want a private reading from me, my email address is in the description box. thehangedmaninthemoon@gmail.com. All one word, all stuck together, no separation, all in small letters. thehangedmaninthemoon@gmail.com. Shoot me an email, we'll get you a reading. Okay? Okay. So friends, thank you. And now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.